Okay, so I'll go ahead and.
Lisa, maybe you might want to say that again,
Sure.
because
Yes.
let me just say before Lisa repeats the land acknowledgement that MSE department has a land acknowledgement. I will pull it up and share it with you at the end. And
Perfect.
that land acknowledgement is part of the reason why we are going to the mounds, because you can have a land acknowledgement and it means nothing if you haven't done the work.
Yes.
And a part of the reason why we're doing this right now, this seminar and this workshop, as well as the other one that is forthcoming, is doing some of the work before going. So Lisa, you can speak to that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Tinker-Sachs. Just shared that we are on the unceded lands of the Muskogee Creek Nation, and that Georgia State, where we are in Atlanta, is part of what used to belong to the Muskogee Creek. This is land that they never gave up, but that they were forced off of in around 1821. And even though a land acknowledgement is not enough, it's still very important that we recognize whose tribal lands that we're sitting on today. So thank you, Dr. Tinker-Sachs, for that. I'm going to also put into our chat our Google Docs that we're going to be sharing here if you want to have your own copy to follow along. And then I will display the screen. We're right about 5:05. Do you think we should go ahead and start? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and if we have late comers, then hopefully they'll get with us and it'll be great. Let me do full. All right, is everyone able to see this?
Yes.
Perfect. And again, if you would rather scan this little QR code, there's that if you want to have a copy of the slides with you. I know that I like to follow along or save it into one of my folders for later. So, by the way, hi, I'm Lisa York. I am the president of AUA, which is Alpha Upsilon Alpha. It's our literary honor society at Georgia State. And do you want to introduce yourself, Ojo Mawusi, our DOC Council? Because AUA and the MSE DOC Council are hosting today's Decolonizing Workshop.
Sure thing. Mawusi, you want to go first?
Thanks, Ojo. So I am Mawusi Kambui Pierre. I am the president of the MSE Doctoral Council starting this academic year. And I'm working with Ojo as vice president and Camilla as treasury. We are excited to be here and thank you all for joining.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marie Ojo Fatimi, best known as Ojo, though. It's like, and if you really want to know something special, if you draw out Ojo, it's an eyeball and then a nose and then another eyeball. And all you have to do is put a smiley face underneath and you have a happy, wonderful face. So excited to be here. I'm really just want to give kudos to Lisa for leading this charge. So really just want to give you all the support as we facilitate this session. And really excited to learn from and with you all. So really excited to hear your contributions, your thoughts, because I'm learning as we decolonize the instruction because I grew up in a colonized mind. I have Nigerian roots, but I was raised in New York, and those colonized instructional practices still permeate. So let's decolonize together.
Yay. Camilla, did you want to say a quick word? Okay, just checking.
Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Hello. I'm Camila. I'm from Brazil, where decolonizing thought, rewriting history, and so on has been pretty big, at least the last 10, 15 years. So this is one of my favorite topics in education. I'm very excited to be here.
We wanted to start. This is a video from Reclaiming Native Truth. It's about 5 minutes long. Let me know if you cannot hear the sound, but we wanted to start with this to look at some of the misperceptions that are related to Indigenous voices, culture, and how these narratives have been crafted and have come to be. And then we're going to talk about how do we start deconstructing these narratives and help to recenter Indigenous voices and other voices. So let me know if the sound's not working when I hit play. Our first speaker here is Danae, and that is what we might commonly call Navajo. I did my student teaching on the Navajo Nation, and so that's one of the things that's kind of brought me to the work of decolonization.
I feel real bad for is Indians.
Can everyone hear? Okay.
Yes.
Welcome. Welcome. They get dogged openly because everybody thinks they're dead.
Indians don't talk like that.
So not all dead, all right?
The idea of invisibility and non-representation is, I think it's a little complicated.
Yes, they fought savagely, for they were a primitive people, and self-preservation is a primitive instinct.
I think the representation isn't so much on Native people, it's how non-natives view natives.
I live in a house, not TP, like a house. As a Native woman, we're very hypersexualized and romanticized. So I think that affects us in academics to just everyday life. They expect you to fit into this form that they would like, and when you don't, they silence your voice.
When it comes to mainstream media, we have this one narrative of history, but every culture has their narrative of history.
That diminishes our youth self-esteem because they're like, what's the point?
It seems like it's designed to devalue us as Native peoples.
If you never see a Native person portrayed as a human, a normal human, and you never meet one, 2% of the people are Native. Every time I see them, they're on TV talking magic talk, then you don't see them as human. It's easier to perform a crime on someone that you think is not human.
If you're always having misconceptions like mirrored back to yourself, then it's harder to get a grasp on your identity, or it tells you that your identity is invalid.
It's tough for me to even really imagine this system sort of valuing other cultures, I guess.
When we see ourselves or our perception of what society thinks of us on TV or the radio or in mascots and whatever the case is, that we automatically feel like we have to be in that slot, like we're automatically seen as that, and so might as well be that.
To add value to our people would be to have people involved as far as designing a society that we all get along in and that we all can share truths about each other instead of propaganda.
The worst that could happen is people would stop hating people for no reason. And if that's all that happens by getting rid of negative stereotypes, that would be great, but there's so much more.
I wonder if we need to get out in the world and actually have human conversations and ask people who don't look like us and don't think like us and don't live near us how they interpret the world.
Well, yeah, I definitely feel like education is important, and I want my children to grow and get great educations. Whenever I was able to like get out and and learn and read and research on my own, it does make you resentful. It makes you feel like, dang, like can I even trust y'all with my kids, or because there's so much left out.
People are ready to hear our stories. People are ready to learn about our cultures.
By using story and injecting Native people into story that humanizes them, that makes them just another person in a story and not stand out because their nativeness.
Oh, it's really important that we work together for new narratives. We have so many opportunities, and it's really beautiful seeing Indigenous people be seen and heard and uniting with all of us, just telling our stories and sharing through our histories.
All right, so I wanted to pause us there and just first of all get people's reactions and thoughts as you were watching that. And then we'll have some more guided discussions moving forward. But just first initial thoughts, first initial impressions, what it made you think about, what it made you consider.
I'm definitely hanging on to this idea of, the stereotypes that are always associated with Native American savage and primitive. And the third thing I'm really holding on to, because it's my own research interest, is storytelling and how we need that new narrative. We need a new story. And that when people tell their own stories, it creates a humanization that is so necessary. I think it's so different when you see someone a picture of them, but then you get to hear who they are and you're like, oh my God, I relate, I understand, I am that person. We are because of you, I am because of you, and you see that mirror. So just knowing how important that is to decenter whiteness or whatever that voice is that's always at the center, and really centering the voices of those who have been marginalized along the way.
Yes. Thanks, Ojo. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think about the early part of the video. The Native people are dismissed or forgotten about, and this concept that they're all dead. Media, film has either a person wearing brown face representing them, or a setting that's in 18th century, 19th century, very tribal interaction with the white man. And it's all circled around interacting with the white man, and not just a Native community society. And then when we do see that, it's written by, produced from a white man. Right. And they are portrayed as long ago. And I think of my upbringing. I attended a high school with an Indian mascot. And we did the very, now I know, racist chop. Yeah. Georgia, University of Georgia still does the chop. No. That's not University of Georgia. What school is it? They won the championship. I draw a blank of what university it was, but they were doing the chop for their Native mascot. And none of this community was seen in my school. If there were students who represented the Native people that the school's land was on, they weren't invited into our school. They didn't talk to us. Our school didn't do the work for us to learn about who they are, let alone who they were. I didn't realize that my home state of Michigan had reservations until I got to post-secondary environment, and there were school organizations for Native students, and I began learning about them. And again, who they are, and not long gone extinct. So I don't know how that can be brought into the public school or the secondary community education, because even now in my profession, I'm still in post-secondary, and that's where I'm introducing Native literature in the classroom at a community college level, but not really grabbing the young minds.
And you Ojo both spoke to this idea of story and how do we tell, how do we tell these stories? Whose stories do we see? Whose stories are erased? Whose stories are made invisible? And Mawusi, you brought up like, who do we bring in from the community that is an Indigenous voice? And I would even go as far to say, who are we finding in our school who has an Indigenous voice? Because the first unit I did with my students in world literature, we were reading a book by a Canadian Indigenous author, it's a YA dystopia called Marrow Thieves. And 3 of my students ended up saying, well, I'm part Muskogee, I'm part Choctaw. Visually, we may not have, I think sometimes we make assumptions about what we see. We also, like, nativeness, indigenous heritage is often blended with other identities. And so even finding out from our students, like, what is their history? What is their legacy? Do they have their own voices that they're bringing in? So I think you both are touching upon this idea of shifting the narrative through visibility, through storytelling and sharing. And then Reclaiming Native Truth has 4 themes that they really look at in shifting the narrative, including values, history, visibility, and call to action. So we'll go over that quickly. If you did get a copy of these slides, you can click on this link right here that says First Nations. And I'm just going to show you this really fast. This is a great place to find materials. They've got various videos, they've got various books they're promoting. The Knowledge Center tells you some of their programs. So anyway, if just you're interested in some resources, we wanted to share some of that with you. But this is from Reclaiming Native Truth. And these are a few things that we thought it might be important to consider. First of all, thinking about values, and I'm not going to read the whole screen to you here, but if you want to take a moment to read values and history, and then we'll talk a little bit about what that's making you think about and consider, and then we'll look at the other 2. Thank you, Jordan, for what you put into the chat. Any thoughts initially looking at values and history? So for example, I can share first, like looking at values and the idea of connection to land. If anyone's into place-based pedagogies, I think that might resonate or stand out to you. Or if you're someone like me who grew up going to lots of national parks with my family and being out in nature and valuing that, that's something that's not just found in Indigenous culture, but it's something that as a non-Native person that I have a lot of value for. Place-based community, land, the natural world, and what is our relationship as human beings to that natural world. So I think this makes an important point that many of us may have those values, and that is also an Indigenous value, and that's a commonality, a bridge that we could find. Anyone else as you're looking at values and history?
I'm definitely able to make a connection to my history as a Nigerian American growing up. It was like, oh, African booty scratchers, and is everyone just walking around with leaves? Have you ever seen a lion before on the street? And it's like, no, I have not. Like, where did you get this perception from? Or is everyone big bellied with flies on their face? Like, there's just these stereotypes or feed the children perceptions that are stereotyped to Africanness. And it's, I believe, or maybe I don't know, I have a bias of being a Nigerian American, that, hopefully we're evolved from that. But I know a lot of those stereotypes have stayed true and, are even pictures in history books. So knowing, who is telling the story is always the one who dominates that narrative.
That's a great connection. Thank you.
I'm thinking about the connection to land. If we could just pause for a moment to look at connection to land, because I think the ways in which the non-native Americans value land is very different from the indigenous perception of land,
That's a good
right?
point. Yes.
Is land about sharing a big communal space, or is land about owning and claiming as my property? So what is in there when we talk about land and respect for land? And what does that mean in a culture that privileges land, but at the individual level? The individual owns the property, not the community.
Right.
So it's a vastly different concept. One is very much corporate based, right? Capitalistic.
Yes.
And the other is about community based sharing of the land and the value of what it carries in terms of the trees, the birds, nature, the interconnectedness with the land, and the fact that it belongs to everybody, not to one or two individuals.
Yes. That's such an important distinction. Thank you, Dr. Tinker-Sachs, pointing that out. So the other two things from Reclaiming Native Truth is this idea of visibility and call to action. So I'll give you a moment to look over that. And then if anyone wants to speak on either of these, you feel free to do so.
So I think about visibility, the one part that says many now natives don't know or don't realize that they know any Native Americans. As I mentioned, I really didn't understand the modern presence of Native American identity until my freshman year at a university. The embarrassment of that realization was a classmate of mine who I mistook visually as Asian American. And we're in a cohort, so we're going on throughout the whole school year. And at some point late in the semester, in the school year, he lets me know that he's Native and his home is a reservation. And again, my embarrassment, I'll chalk it up to youth, was I thought you were Asian. And he laughed it off and he said that was a common misconception. And he gave me more information about his background, his narrative, his demographic, his upbringing, and that visibility of how non-natives, my experience, so let me close down to just me, sees a person and my assumptions of their heritage, their nationality, their race, creed, never initially thinks Native. There's assumptions of Arab, Asian, Latin, African American, so on and on and on, but not Native. And poor disclosure and embarrassment, that assumption from freshman undergrad to PhD students decades later, it is unfortunately ingrained.
And I think that really speaks to this systemic erasure part. So thank you, Mawusi, for speaking on that. To me, it's fascinating. I went to the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C., and it talks about how even though the indigenous population in the United States is like 1 to 2%. We have so much exoticizing and fetishizing of Native culture, heritage, history, and yet even despite all of that, we still think of Indigenous people as of the past, not in the present. And so I think you're commenting on that of just like when you meet someone, you're not thinking, oh, hey, because we have this ideology of like, they don't exist in our country anymore, which is not true, but yeah. Anyone else?
I was curious to see if Jordan could speak on the resource that he shared in the chat.
I can't say much. I was looking when I was taking Dr. Tinker Stack's class this spring. I was looking for, like, I teach chemistry, and it's sometimes hard to fit in some of the content of this, of like how do I cover the material I'm asked to cover and address some of these things without it seeming very forced, and also that might or might not get me fired. So anyway, I was just looking for things, and so I haven't delved very deeply into this, but the Royal Society of Chemistry is like Great Britain's American Chemical Society, and so when I was looking for things that related to science, this was one of the things I came across, and they have several pages of things. So I just wanted to share. I don't know who else is science in the group or not, but we just don't have like, or I don't have the, like, you know, you mentioned the like Canadian author that, you know, like I just don't have those kind of things to draw on with in when I teach chemistry. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know
Yeah.
I know Camilla's science, so we got at least one other science person.
And Julia as well, but
And Julia.
but yeah, so
Thank you, Jordan. I'm gonna send things over to Ojo, unless you want me to jump in and let you share our poem that we have, because we're language literacy people, so we'll do a little poetry with you.
Yeah, so I'll read this poem, and then we'll debrief it quickly. And I believe the next slide kind of connects as well, but I'll read this poem for us. My House is the Red Earth by Joy Harjo. My house is the red earth. It could be the center of the world. I've heard New York, Paris, or Tokyo called the center of the world, but I say it is magnificently humble. You could drive by and miss it. Radio waves can obscure it. Words cannot construct it, for there are some sounds left to sacred wordless form. For instance, that fool crow picking through trash near the coral understands the center of the world as the greasy strips of fat. Just ask him. He doesn't have to say that the earth has turned scarlet through fierce belief after centuries of heartbreak and laughter. He perches on the blue bowl of the sky and laughs. I like this poem, Lisa.
Yay. I love Georgia.
Great choice. So any thoughts? What comes to mind? What words jump out? You can drop it in the chat. You can come off mute. What jumps out to us when we hear this? Or what is the tone? What's the mood?
Well, I connect to this poem and quite a few of the other things that were spoken earlier. Because all my life I've heard of Muskogee, because my mother's from Wagner, Oklahoma, and Muskogee's not far from Wagner. I've been to Muskogee.
Wow.
So you hear these places, and you know, I grew up playing with red dirt, and I'm gonna say, you know, red dirt as sort of the center of my world. It wasn't strange or unusual. But as I got older and realized the kind of rarity of it, you know, I feel like even in this, it's rare to have. It's very moist. You know, it's very uncommon, and and I think I don't know. I won't say the Native Americans are kind of like that too, kind of just unusual or uncommon. But in this country, they are, they are considered. I mean, 1% of the population. I didn't know it was that low. So people who once thrived, in this land, throughout the land, this is their land, but so many of us now have, I know I have some Native American roots. My grandfather's mother was Native American, Cherokee Indian, but I come from that part of the country where you have that, and it's a lot more common. Was it somebody said they may not have ever interacted with Native Americans or something like that? I think she might have said, but or had seen one in person, but as rare as they may have been, like nationwide, again, in that part of the country, you can recognize them when you see them.
Yes, and especially in Oklahoma because of the Trail of Tears and
Yeah,
so many people being forced off their land to Oklahoma. So absolutely. Thank you, Krista.
Can I add, and just like I was listening to this story on NPR about Muskogee, particularly how Muskogee, Georgia, well, here, I guess here and Muskogee, Georgia. I don't know. There are mounds named Muskogee, and because the Trail of Tears, you have these other places in other parts of the country that have the same name, but I never thought about that connection to the South.
That's a good point. Yeah, we don't always think, I think you're right. Like we think of Oklahoma and some places out in the Southwest as being more tied to indigenous cultures, identities, and heritage. But of course, the South has had a very large indigenous population before being forced off of the land. And I also have had a few students and parents who they have connections in Oklahoma because their family was originally here and then was moved out there, like if they go back generations and generations. I love that you brought up the red dirt. This reminds me of, there's a indigenous author who's fairly well known, Vine DeLorean, and he has a book called Red Earth, White Lies. And I like the centering of the earth, which Dr. Tinker Sachs, you spoke on earlier, like how land is viewed not in the capitalistic way, but in the indigenous way of knowing, and sort of the honoring of the earth. And also, I know red has been used as a derogatory term, but this is almost like a reclaiming of that, the red earth. And, if we're looking at indigenous red people, which again, used as a derogatory term, but being reclaimed. And then the reference to the crow, I really like that fool crow because it's part of those trickster tales. And so that idea of storytelling that we brought up earlier makes me think of that.
I want to go back to what Jordan said and then also pull it into this wonderful poem. I introduced chapters of a book called the Life and Traditions of the Red Man, written by one of the very first Native anthropologists on his nation in the early 1800s. And the book is clearly a narrative, but it is him capturing and writing his nation's life and traditions as clearly labeled. There's a chapter 1 and definitely chapter 1 and chapter 4 where the author is speaking of the legacy of the first man and their oral history and how the first man sustained the generations after him. So the first man, of course, being made by gods, and then he was the leader, the teacher, very similar to an Adam Jesus blend type of person that taught medicine that taught ways of life, that taught natural and herbal chemical ways for cultivating and healing. So although this book does not have any pure science properties, the periodic table type of layout, it does show native traditions of natural and chemical practices. So that's a way to think about how this narrative can be brought into the sciences. Then next, moving into this poem, I looked at a little bit of science or STEM, you know, radio waves, the dirt, even the blue bowl sky. Here we have these scientific language, because I don't know how radio waves work. I don't know how the sky works. I don't know how red dirt works. But here in this poem, it is taking us to the modern day, present understanding of these native traditions are not moving away from the wave of sci-fi, the wave of chemistry, the wave of technology, because we have this poet in the 21st century addressing these things. Yes, the land is important, but is spiritually significant and medically, chemically, scientifically important too. So that's a thought I had back when Jordan addressed, well, where is it bringing into the STEM?
Good connection.
We pick apart the words, we can find it.
Yeah, that's awesome, Lucy. I completely, did anyone else want to share? Lisa, I don't know if you want to move into the debrief, or not really a debrief at all. It's a exploration, but I don't know if you're ready to get into that. Like Mawusi said, I think it's really going beyond the physical into that cultural and spiritual. And as we explore, the next segment is really diving into the physical world, though, and finding the wisdom that's been happening in the natural world with Indigenous poets. Lisa dropped the link in the chat. And I think it's really cool what you pulled, Lisa, because I think on your slide deck, it says you're on each location marker, it reveals the poet, a feature of an image, and you can actually hear the poet recite and comment on an original poem that they had. So that's super interesting. Lisa, I don't know if you want to just individually or you want to just guide us through.
So this is where I thought maybe, I don't even know if we have enough for breakout rooms, but maybe just putting people with like 2 or 3 and maybe going through and picking. So it's Joy Harjo was the poet laureate, and she put this together. This is kind of like her project that she worked on with it's an Indigenous map, and on the map there are various voices. So like, let's say you wanted to hear this one. Okay, this is in Washington, D.C., and it tells you a little bit about the poet Susan Cho Harjo, who same last name. But you can click anywhere, and what it'll do is it'll show you the as Ojo said, it'll show you the poet's poem and commentary. Highly recommend Natalie Diaz, her poetry collection. One of her poems that got really famous is called American Arithmetic. But if you want to check her out, so maybe we give you like 5 or so minutes to explore in breakout rooms. Does that sound good? Like 2 or 3 people, you can kind of explore and then share a little bit about what you're finding. Does that work for people? Okay. Did anyone want to share something as you were exploring, discussing, looking at the map, sharing a little about the poets that you encountered? Just a quick, and then we realize we actually need to keep ourselves moving, but any quick comments or thoughts that you wanted to share?
I thought it was interesting, like where the clusters happen to like be centralized or local. And we talked about how there was very little representation in the South. But I said
We
that
noticed that too, yeah.
that's consistent with history and the migration.
Yeah.
And we noticed there's just a few like Hawaii, Alaska, but of course it's mostly centralized on the mainland where natives once resided. But again, geographically it's consistent with the changes that we know took place in history.
That's a great point. Anyone else?
I pointed out a little bit that there are definitely some people in there that you don't expect, like your vision of what a Native American person should look like is very different. So like we were talking about before.
Good point. And how that narrative has been shaped. Yeah. So as we think a little bit about not only Indigenous voices, but like what are we doing to honor decolonizing work and looking at language and how story does shape the ways that we are and behave and, our epistemologies. We just thought we could ask a few questions about language and how your own family uses language to document parts of their culture. If there's maybe a favorite traditional recipe, craft, family story, and anything that you've specifically done to help preserve your own family traditions. So like my great aunts of my grandmother, they've been typing up little stories, like they each write a 1-page and they want to put it all together in a book. So if you have something like that you want to drop into the chat, just so we have a collection of ideas of ways to decolonize how we're using language, how we can celebrate family and heritage language. And then for time's sake, we're not going to read this article, but we've linked in anything that's blue as a hyperlink. So we linked in an article about the importance of protecting and revitalizing Indigenous languages, which will then lead us into a mini documentary that we wanted to show. I don't know, Ojo, do you think we have time to watch the mini documentary?
I know the mini is about 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I don't think.
I think we'll just tell them about it. Y'all, I overplanned. Okay, so we'll just tell you about it. It's called Marie's Dictionary. It's embedded into the slides. I'll share the slides again at the end. And it is about the last fluent speaker of her language, which is called Ocmulgee, and her effort to create a dictionary to pass on for the younger generation, and specifically working with her grandson. And we were going to talk through some of these things, but we want to make sure we honor your time and don't keep you too long past 6 o'clock. So anyway, these can be things you think about in your own learning journey or share with students. And then the little documentary, it's very short. It's about 10 minutes, like 9.5 minutes. So please, when you have the chance, we'd love to invite you to view it. It's pretty touching. And then let me jump ahead. We want to give kind of a reminder about some upcoming ideas related to doing decolonizing work. And Dr. Tinker Sachs is going to share what she's been drafting as a land acknowledgement statement and get our feedback on it. And then we also want to talk about just a few other things that are happening with Georgia State in the next few weeks. So if you have never been to the mounds, these are some pictures. There's like a trail that leads up to the mounds after you leave the visitor center. And some of the mounds are smaller, some are larger. This is one of the most famous. This is the Earth Lodge, and part of what makes it famous is that you can actually go into it. And there on the upper corner here, you can see this is where people sat. So there's like 50 seats around. And then this is known as the Eagle Lodge Mound because this is in the shape of an eagle. So you'll get to see all of this, kind of like an advertisement to hope that you'll come on June 14th. This is outside of the Earth Lodge Mound, so you have to I'm kind of tall. You have to duck down pretty low to walk into the entrance, but it is really powerful to visit this space. And so we're hoping you will join us. And then this is if you have not yet signed up to join us. And also for our next decolonizing workshop on June 5th, you can scan that QR code there, or you can click on the blue hyperlink. And that is so that you can let us know. We're trying to organize a bus. So that's so you can let us know. And please share expansively with your friends, networks, whomever, that are part of the doctoral program, because this is kind of like our doctoral outing that we'd like to do across MSE. And then I am going to stop sharing after everyone's had a chance. Have you all had a chance to?
Lisa,
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to share, I don't know if everybody has watched the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, that shows a lot of how the relationships between the white and the indigenous populations actually were, in the sense of the indigenous being used and abused by the white man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also dropped the sign-in sheet in the chat, so make sure you're signing up. There's a limited amount of seats. It's a free bus ride, so you know you want to take advantage of all things free. So.
All right, and then I will stop the share so that Dr. Tinker Sachs can share with us about the land acknowledgement statement that Georgia State is putting together.
Let's see if I can find it, find the right one, because I've got so many files open, trying to do too many things at one time, right? So give me a second, please.
Oh, yes, that's
okay.
fine. As you're doing that, I'm just looking through the chat. Thank you, everyone who contributed some of the ways. These are beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing those.
Oh, I can't share unless you give me the privilege.
Really? I thought I
Lisa.
did that. Okay. All right, try now. I think I fixed it.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, it's going to be too many files that I have open. I'm going to read it to you. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, at Georgia State University. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, the indigenous, Muskogee Creek, and Cherokee peoples, whose land we occupied, the colonized, the enslaved, and the freed, as we work for justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, reconciliation, healing, and peace, now and in the future. Welcome to our department.
Wow. I love that.
I will share that with you again. You can think about it. We tried to be inclusive of the different peoples who came before us in the space near to our College of Education. It was a place that was near to the meeting points for the Native folks, and also where at 5 Points, also where people were, the enslaved were sold, and also where the Atlanta massacre happened in that area, around that big broad area. So all of that I wanted to include all of that, as well as acknowledging the land. So you can let that sink with you. We'll bring it up again next time, and we'll bring it up again as we continue to do the work that all of us in this group, I'm very happy that you recognize what we need to be doing. Over to you, Lisa and Ojo.
Yes, thank you. That was excellent. And I'm glad that our department will have a land acknowledgement soon, because I was sharing with Ojo and Dr. Tinker Sachs, I went looking for it and
It's not
couldn't
there.
find it. That's why you got one from psychology department. So what I just put into the chat is if you got here a little late and you wanted a copy of those slides, if you wanted to have a chance to look at that, And then June 5th will be our next workshop that we do. Thanks for the question. And it will be conducted by students who were part of Dr. Tinker Sack's How to Be a Doc Student seminar this last semester. Is that correct, Dr. Tinker Sacks?
Yes, as well as Joshua Robinson, who agreed to participate in that sharing today. So thank you, Joshua, and thank you to all the doc students. Julia, you were here, and Jordan, you were here. So maybe some of the others might want to share the work that we have been doing in the semester, and we will need to discuss how we're going to do that. You might want to talk about the PowerPoints that you've done, and incorporate some of our work in the activities following the format from today. So that would be up to the next group to see how they're going to do that, right? Joshua, any ideas? Jordan, anything you want to share? Julia, anything you want to share? The text that we were using as they come back, the text that we were using was Linda to Hawaii Smith's Decolonizing Methodologies. And it is all about how we can decolonize our work, whether it is, doesn't matter which country you're living in. She's coming from New Zealand, where she is an Indigenous person, and talking about the work there and how we can do very many different things in our praxis. And over to you, Mawuzi, in talking about your thinking. And thank you for disclosing that personal growth that is needed, all of us. We can decolonize the ways in which we think, because we have been greatly impacted by society's indoctrination through our schooling, through our education, in various forms with parents, with community members, and so on, and we have to push back.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for those of you that put questions in the chat. So this will not be the same workshop on June 5th, but it'll be a continuation of doing decolonial work and decolonizing. But part of what we're looking at, Joshua is going to be bringing in some Black crit and hip hop pedagogy. And then I'm not sure what our doc seminar students are bringing in, but I will be there to find out on June 5th at 5 p.m. And then June 14th, we will be leaving in the morning to go to the Mounds. There'll be more information coming out on that. We also want to remind you to mark your calendars for June 1st. There's a very exciting hair conference. It's a biennial hair conference at Georgia State University. Come eat breakfast, eat lunch, hear sessions and speakers, get inspired. Dr. Tinker Sacks has told you about it, so we're going to be there. We're hoping you'll be there June 1st. Looking forward to seeing you then, especially if you're a teacher and the school year's wrapping up. June's a great time to now get to do learning for yourself. And then finally, if you are not a member of AUA or a member of our doc council, we would like to invite you to join us and to take part in that organization. If you have questions about that, please let us know and we can tell you how you can join. Any final thoughts, comments?
Yes. It's a question in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Same link for the Zoom. It's a different one, but I will send it out. It was sent out in the initial email, but and did you all see the announcement on PIN? We put an announcement on PIN, but I'm not sure that got pushed out. It did not. Okay. We'll send that out earlier than
we'll send it out again.
Yes. So thank you
I'm
all.
so happy to see all of you here, and I'm very grateful to our MSE Doc Council and AUA leaders for organizing this wonderful session. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You all. Yay.
We get information about how to join AUA. Is AUA?
Oh, yes. In fact, let me actually drop in our little, let me do the AUA link. I have it, how to join AUA. I've got it.
Okay.
I saved it earlier. So let me grab that and I'll drop it in to our chat right now.
And Dr. Tinker Sacks, I didn't get the pleasure of having your class this past school year. But
hopefully next time.
Fingers crossed.
But it's a different text every time.
Okay. That's good.
And the department is also compiling a list of books If you would make sure that the leaders for this session have your names, we will also get a copy of a book to you too.
Okay.
Ooh. Making a note of that.
I guess the way you
Other
know,
than- okay,
the way
sorry,
you
go
know,
ahead.
I guess the way you know that you're reinforcing colonial ideology is by just more reading coming into the
No, that's why we have that wonderful trip coming up. Look at
trip. Oh yeah,
that.
I'll be there.
Okay, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to the land, right? The
Yeah.
red earth.
And if you all haven't been, I don't know if anyone's been, but it's a very cool experience. If you've not been before. So
All of this is in preparation for that.
yes.
So it's not all about reading, it's about experiencing. But you have to do the preparation before we go, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all so much for sharing this time with us, for coming. It was really nice to see you and meet some of you, and hope to see you again on June 5th and then June 1st and June 14th. So we'll get to see a lot of each other.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.